Everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here, going through the AFC Wildcard Weekend Playoff Slate. Excited to be here with everybody. If you're not following me at Jim Coventry NFL, to be on Twitter, please do so. Try to share stuff with actionable advice, and I will have stuff up by the time the playoff games start, but enough to get prop bets in, a lot of rationale so you can comb through, decide what you like, but I'll lay out all the trends for those prop bets. Definitely want to give everybody the best possible advice. And also, RotoWire, if you are on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe button. Would appreciate that greatly. Welcome to those on Instagram. Welcome to those on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Let's break this down. AFC games, here we go. Chargers at the Jaguars, the Saturday evening game. The line's moved. It's Chargers right now -1. We'll see how that line fluctuates back and forth a bit. It could move in any particular direction. As of today, Thursday, as of this recording, Mike Williams has not practiced Wednesday or Thursday with apparently back spasms. Coach Brandon Staley does seem optimistic he'll play, says that he does not need to practice to play. Would be nice if it's a Sunday game. It's not. But I'm optimistic Mike Williams will play in this game. It does heavily impact the game if he's on the field. When we get in the breakdowns later, it was very critical for him to take advantage of mismatches that are there. Over and under on this game is sitting at 47.5. Both teams just are at 23.5 on their team totals. All right. First of all, these teams played in week 3. We can't take much from that game. Remember, Justin Herbert had his ribs busted up, and so he was still playing in a compromised state. Keenan Allen had his hamstring injury that lasted, 10 weeks? Keenan Allen wasn't there. Joey Bosa was injured very early in this game, so it was not a very realistic portrait of what these teams are going to be. In that game, Austin Eckler could never get it going on the ground. 4 carries, 5 yards, and on his 8 catches, only 48 yards, 6 yards a catch. Mike Williams caught a single pass for 15 yards. It was a touchdown, but it was 6 targets. So he was not very efficient in that game. Josh Palmer is the one who came through 99 yards and 6 catches. Now, James Robinson was on the Jaguars at that time, and he had a 50-yard touchdown run in that game. He ran for 100 yards. So, I mean, that big carry goes a long way toward that. Travis Etienne, 13 carries, 45 yards. So right around close to the 4-yard carry, not quite that. That was not a really great opportunity by him. But otherwise, James Robinson, like I said, that big touchdown run definitely got him home in that one. Trevor Lawrence threw 3 touchdown passes, and top 3 receivers all scored. Now, not the tight end. It was Zay Jones. Marvin Jones can't really call him top receiver, but he's their third guy, right? And then Christian Kirk, of course, scored in that one. Zay Jones, 10 catches, 85 yards, so a lot of short stuff. And then Christian Kirk, 6 for 72. So, again, there was not a big explosive plays in the passing game. That's what we typically see out of Brandon Staley's defenses, limiting those explosive passing games. So, very important there. So, let's break this one down. So, Justin Herbert's coming into this one. His yardage in the last 3 games hasn't been great. He had a while he was ripping up to 300 or close to it yard games. He's held to 235 yards or fewer in 2 of his last 3 games, and they tried on Sunday. Now, Denver is a great pass defense, and he's thrown 1 or fewer touchdown passes in 4 of his last 6. Now, though that was a little bit of the recent stuff where he was better. Last 2 games, it was 2-2. So he ended the season wrong, but before then, he was not getting multiple touchdowns. On the season, he only has 8 multi-touchdown games, and he's only hit 300 yards 5 times. So, that's less than a third of his games. So that's interesting as well. Again, he had the rib injury earlier in the season. That might have something to do with that. Now, in terms of his pass protection, we know the Chargers' offensive line is bad, but they're particularly bad in run blocking. They're actually about average in pass blocking. They're ranked out per Pro Football Focus at number 19. They're good enough there. Now, the Jaguars defense, they are a bottom 10 coverage unit. This is not a good secondary. They do have a couple people who can cover, but realistically, they are not very good in coverage. So we will see that we'll talk about opportunities. You can hit them up in the slot. They have one safety, Andrew Sisco, who can cover well. But at corner, there are definitely 2 weak links out of 3. And so there's a great opportunity. The middle of the field is a very nice place to attack this team. And the Jaguars do get good pressure, though. They're 8th in pressure rate. But in terms of fantasy production, they're in the bottom third of the league with fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So what will the Chargers need to do? The first thing is I unfortunately don't trust Joe Lombardi a whole lot. The easy button in this game is simple. If they get Justin Herbert on the move, that gets him away from interior pass rush. That is where, and he's a phenomenal passer when he's out of contain, out of the pocket, dynamic thrower. And if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen play, well, Keenan Allen will play. Mike Williams were concerned about that. But that's the thing we have to look at. But if they get him on the move, it will be very problematic for the Jaguars defense. But if Joe Lombardi makes the mistake, Herbert's kind of been freelancing, though. So I think Lombardi will try to keep him in the pocket. But we've seen it. The last month, Herbert has been doing better at saying, yeah, I'm out. And he just rolls out, and he just keeps looking downfield. Patrick Mahomes does that kind of thing. I'm not comparing Mahomes and Herbert, but it's similar how when they break outside, they're always looking downfield. Now, that will, again, if Mike Williams is healthy, that's a big deal because of his mismatch at corner. He's a 6'1", 195 guy. And so that's going to be very big advantage from a physical standpoint, especially for a contested catch guy like Mike Williams. If I said Mike Evans, I'm sorry. I may have said that. May not have either. All right. So Austin Eckler. Now, Eckler's been scoring. He scored in 9 of his last 12 games. He's very, very money in the red zone, multiple scores in some games too, right? But they've started to ratchet down his rushing ups. He's had a heavy workload. We thought it was heavy last year. This year it was even heavier. But he's had 12 or fewer rushes in 5 of his last 7 games. Joshua Kelly has actually, after 2 brutal years, he's actually been a good, solid between the tackles runner, and he has been taking a little bit of work. 9 to 10 carries in 3 of Kelly's last 4 games. So that's been very helpful. Now, Eckler hasn't had quite the dynamic receiving profile he had early in the season. He has 4 catches in his last 3 games, but he's less than 40 receiving yards in each game. Now, again, it's a low number of catches, but we're not seeing those huge explosive receiving plays. And then I wonder if that's 2 years of heavy usage. Remember, Eckler was begging for help in the offseason, and it just didn't work out. So anyway, the run blocking, we said earlier, horrible for the Chargers. Number 32 in run blocking. They're facing a top half run defense. The Jags are very good against the run. Now, and they give up about middling fantasy points, about 16th in fantasy points, middling in running back receptions, 13th. So it's a neutral matchup as it goes. And again, if Mike Williams is healthy, that really does help to open things up because the Jaguars are going to have to be concerned with both Allen and if Williams plays Williams. That should potentially open things up for Eckler. If Williams doesn't play, that really allows the D to hone in on Eckler and thinking that Allen's not going to crush them from the slot. So there's that. Overall, we go to the receivers. Now, Mike Williams, again, we keep talking. We don't know what's going on with his back injury, but he has at least 67 yards in his last 4 full games, and he's hit that number in 8 of his last 11. So he has been productive when on the field. He's seen at least 6 targets in 9 of his last 10 full games. And so he's getting enough. He's not getting heavily targeted, but he's getting a solid base of targets. Now, Keenan Allen, 86 or more yards in 5 of his last 6 games. He has been playing at a very high level. He has at least 6 catches in 5 of his last 6 and at least 9 targets in those games. So he's getting targeted very heavily, very, very high floor play with moderate ceiling. The explosiveness he had early in his career isn't quite there. Now, the tight end, you can attack the Jaguars tight end position. They give the 5th most fantasy points at tight ends, and they are not very good. Here's the thing. It kept turning over the last few weeks. We talked last week with DFS. We talked about how Gerald Everett was a play, and he scored. So he worked out for DFS for us cheap. But we also said, if you want to really go lower, Donald Parham would be an option. Now, Donald Parham he's played over 20 snaps a game in his last 4 games. Not a lot. He's had some plays called back by penalty. And it's been 2 to 3 targets, not much in 3 of his last 4 games, but a lot of those are downfield. And in the last 4 games, he has a 31-yard, 35, 8 yards and a touchdown, and then he has a 3-yard one in there. But overall, if you're playing DFS, he's cheap, and he could see an expanded role with the poor quality of play that Jacksonville has against tight ends. So Donald Parham could be a very sneaky DFS play. Gerald Everett, he's seeing diminished snaps. He's gone below 40 snaps in the last 3 games. The first time all year that's happened. And he's had 15 or fewer yards in his last 3 games. So honestly, in the last 4 games, Donald Parham has pretty much outproduced him. Interesting, but again, neither have been heavily productive. Now, I said earlier, the narrative for the Chargers offense is going to be getting Herbert out. If they can get him out, roll him out, that's going to be a very tough deal for the Jaguars defense. And Tyson Campbell's a smaller corner, he's 6'1", 195. If Mike Williams is playing, he's too big and physical. Campbell's easily their best corner, but he won't have much of a chance getting up the contested catches that Williams get after. And again, I said earlier, Keenan Allen, huge mismatch in the slot. So that we've talked about these edges, but the Chargers should have success unless they keep Herbert in the pocket, where that pass rush of the Jaguars could become an issue. Now, the Jaguars on offense. So as we're looking at the game here, Trevor Lawrence has 1 touchdown pass total over his last 3 games. Now, tough matchups, right? He played the Jets. Houston, believe it or not, they allow very little to quarterbacks because you run on them all day. So it's kind of the caveat. It's not that they're a great pass defense, but you don't have to pass on them. And then Tennessee, he didn't have a great game against Tennessee. We saw how that shook out. They won. The defense carried them, but he did not have a good game, and that was a very exploitable matchup. And Trevor Lawrence has 230 or fewer yards in his last 3 games. But prior to that, he was on the heater. That's where he had 3+ touchdowns, 318 yards in 3 or 4 games. So he was rolling, but now competition got a little tougher. The Houston matchup, he run on them, and he did not have a strong end of the fantasy season. Now, the Chargers, believe this or not, they rate out as the second best per Pro Football Focus pass defense in the league. Brandon Staley coaches it up well, and I know they look terrible against Denver. I can't explain what happened there. I don't know if they mentally didn't show for that game, but clearly they were not on their A game. But they will be well prepared for this game. They basically play a great zone. They keep big plays in front of them. You don't have to worry so much about big plays with the Jaguars. Marvin Jones, those days are long gone. Evan Ingram runs out of horizontal. Christian Kirk is a slot guy, although they'll occasionally scheme him downfield. And Zay Jones is not much of a threat to an outfield. So I think this really plays into the Chargers, that they could keep their zone packed in a little bit, maybe address the run a little better. Having Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the field does help the run defense a bit. They are both very good run defenders. We think about them as pass rushers, but they're both very not functional. They're very tactical football players who play the full range of the game. They're best at pass rushing, but they both are very good against the run. Now, that said, they can commit a little extra attention to the run. That would make things a little more difficult for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Chargers give the 7th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, and that's with Joey Bosa missing the majority of the season. And that was the main one, with him being out, and then some transition in the secondary. They've really figured things out. Now, we can't take the Pro Football Focus pressure rate and apply it. The Chargers are 26th. When you play the whole season on Joey Bosa, it's not going to make sense because he's the engine of the pass rush. This is a team that should be in the top 7 or better passers. So if Bosa's healthy, apparently last week he came out, was grimacing, but apparently he's fine. If he is fine, Mack becomes a secondary rusher, which is just huge for them. So they definitely can create a lot of pressure, especially if they can get the Jaguars into down and distance situations that are favorable. So this works out. Now, Travis Etienne, let's go to the running game before we get to the wide receivers. So Etienne has at least 83 rush yards in 3 of his last 4 games. If we take that to an 8-game sample, though, he's had 54 or fewer in 5 of the 8 games, with the 83 yards being the 3 exceptions. Now, we bet the under on him for the prop last week, and I don't know that he had 20 yards. I said, you're not running on Tennessee. Not happening. Non-starter, and there was never a chance he was going to do anything against Tennessee. Well, this isn't Tennessee. This is the Los Angeles Chargers. You can run on the Chargers. Not much of a problem. Now, ET has been a little more involved in receiver. Not much. 17 to 32 yards in his last 4 games. 2 to 3 receptions. So he's being minimally used in the receiving game. But when we talk about props, he's in play this week that way. Now, the run blocking in Jacksonville's terrible. Their bottom 3 run blocking line. And the problem is their left tackle Cam Robinson a few weeks ago got injured. He's on the injured reserve. So they lost a really good lineman. And so here you got really poor run blocking. and you got the Chargers that are the second worst run defense in the league. Different metrics have them in different places, but they're not obviously a good run defense. But at least the poor run blocking, and with Joey Bosa back, it actually makes it at least maybe a little closer to neutral than just like a slam dunk for the Chargers. It might make it a little closer for them for sure. But here's the weird thing. The Chargers give the 10th fewest fantasy points to running backs. They get gashed around because they give the 6th fewest running back receptions. That's huge. In PPR, those are so valuable, right? And the 6th fewest running back, I'm already said receptions allowed, and they don't give a lot of yardage. Here's what my point was. And so they give up some yards on the ground, a lot of yards on the ground. And if they're big plays, a lot of times it's not sustaining running game. And that's where I see the problem. I don't know that ETN is going to be that sustaining runner, 4, 5, 7, 2, 4, 8. Those are the things that move the chains, keep the offense on schedule. If ETN is, 1, 2, 1, 15, nice, stat line's the same, but it's not sustaining offense. And they need to keep Trevor Lawrence out of obvious passing situations. But so that's going to be an interesting battle how that shakes out. But again, Cam Robinson, left tackle being out, that doesn't help their running game. I think they'll be successful. I just don't know how crazy it goes. Now at receiver, Zay Jones, and I invested heavily in fantasy, and Zay Jones, my late round picks in my 14-team leagues and things like that. Very, very happy with the return on it. But ultimately, he is situational. When the game works out and he has an opportunity where he has a big mismatch, he can take advantage of it. He has a great quarterback throwing in the ball. Not all works to his advantage. But in this game, this is not a good matchup. Chargers allow the 9th fewest fantasy points. They're very disciplined in their zone. They can play man too when they need to, and they could choose to go that route against these receivers. These receivers are not scary. They could do that, and they could really make a tighter window and get some pass rush on Trevor Lawrence. So they may scheme this up a little bit. We may see a little more man than usual from them. Brandon Staley will have a good game plan. He always does defensively when he has a high-profile game, right? But Zay Jones, 68 or more yards in 4 of his last 8, but in his last 3, 24 or fewer. So he's just, after that huge 3-touchdown game, he's just like kind of been down. So it's going to be, he's always going to be that guy where, the floor is super low, but because of his role in that offense, he could show up. Now, Christian Kirk, 6 or fewer receptions in his last 7. Early in the year, we were seeing some of those higher catch games, but he's kind of settled in as that 4 to 6 catch guy. And his yardage in his last 7, 4 of those games under 46. Now in his last 8, 92.5. So it's either he's kind of like in the 90s to 100s, or he's like below 50. So he's kind of like, he doesn't have that mid-range where you get those 70, 80-yard games. Those don't really happen a whole lot. So that's kind of interesting here. Now, he scored in only 2 of his last 13 games, a total of 4 touchdowns. But overall, he scored once in his last 7. Once in his last 7 games. That's what I meant to say. So Marvin Jones, occasionally we'll see a play from him, right? But otherwise, his best days are gone. He was a great player when he had things going for him, but obviously the years are piling up on him, and that's fine. He's been 30 or fewer yards in 6 of his last 9. If you're going to bet him, you're going to bet an under prop on him, But in weeks 14 to 16, it just was not pretty for him. He was just not strong down the stretch. He has 2 touchdowns in his last 13 games. Now, here's the thing. So he's been over 50 yards 3 times all season. 2 were against the Texans. He had a 61 in his 2 best games of the season, 61 under 4 against the Texans. And then he had a 50-yard game. And other than that, everything has been low volume. So we're going to expect more of the same here. So ultimately, finishing off the Jaguars, their passing attack does not match up well with this Chargers defense. Derwin James at safety, a wild card, joker, chess piece. You can move them around. You've got the rushers in Bosa and Mack. Michael Davis is playing well at corner, just very well disciplined. So this is not a favorable matchup. They really have to get the run game going. But again, I just think with their poor run blocking, it's not a consistent unit. And I think that's going to keep them from sustaining offense, which is problematic. If you're betting this game, I know a lot of people, it's a toss-up. I get it. Chargers have the better quarterback here. Will Herbert be a better quarterback in 5 years? Maybe. Maybe Lawrence will be. I think that Herbert is an elite quarterback. I think Trevor Lawrence may be. But right now, Justin Herbert consistently bails the team out. Trevor Lawrence, we've seen it in flashes. He'll have weeks where he does, and then weeks where it just doesn't really work so much. If He was there already. He probably could have really made a big dent against Tennessee where he wouldn't have needed the defensive touchdown to bail them out in that game. So I think the game plan that Staley can do to give Lawrence a lot of trouble here. And Jacksonville Trails, that's not what they want. They do not want to be one-dimensional if they trail. I'm going to lay the point with the Chargers. I think the Chargers win this thing. I think the Chargers, look, there are three distinct favorites in the AFC. We know that. But the Chargers are getting healthier. If Mike Williams is out there, they may get Rashawn Slater, the left tackle, back next week. This is a dark horse team to make a run in the playoffs. If you're betting small amounts on teams to go through, taking a flyer on the Chargers is not outlandish. All the teams in the AFC, as great as they are flawed right now. And the Chargers with that quarterback, and if they get the game planning on the defense, they can be there. Am I predicting they're going to win the Super Bowl? No. But if I'm laying a number of bets out there, I want to sprinkle some action in on the Chargers. A, the odds are really good. B, their defense is coached well, and their quarterback is elite. And those are recipes that can get you through a postseason. All right, next game. Dolphins and the Bills. Sorry, but we got to talk about it. We won't make this one long. All right, we'll cut this one a little shorter, I think. And I know it's Jamie's in the house. Jamie, I'm doing dynasty content. I will talk fantasy football all off season. I will study the rookies once we get closer to once we get down to like the AFC NFC Championship weekend, and I'll start tearing into the rookies then. So I will give you some. I'm not the resident dynasty guy, but I'll give you a lot. I'll give you a lot of off season. I definitely will set you up with a lot of stuff. So I will keep you involved all off season. All right, Dolphins Bills. So Sunday, early game. Bills, that line's going to move up. Skylar Thompson's playing quarterback. I don't know where that line ends up. It's going to keep floating toward bigger numbers. We could see 17 by kickoff. I could totally understand. I could see that happening. That line's going to keep blowing up. I don't even know what it is right now. I checked it earlier, and it was 12. That line's going to go up. So Skylar Thompson, we don't know a lot on him. Here's what I'll tell you. Has he been a train wreck? I can't say that. He played the Jets twice. He stepped in when Teddy got knocked out in the first drive, 19-33 for 166 and a pick. All right, not the end of the world. They're playing the Jets. And then he plays the Jets again last week, 20-31, 152, no picks, no touchdowns, but he's playing the Jets. What were they going to do, right? So that said, and he played New England as well. He had 12-21 for 104. But Bill Belichick, come on. You got a young quarterback in there. He's going to make you miserable. So I'm not saying Skylar Thompson's good. But what I'm saying is this. I'm just going to get right to my narrative here because we can't break this game down because thank you, Em. Appreciate you. So I can't give you the regular breakdown because we don't have a quarterback. We don't have Tua. We don't have Teddy, who's going to be an emergency backup maybe. So I've got to tell you what I can. So Mike McDaniel has done a nice job coaching here. Here's what I expect him to do. I think they can hang in this game. I'm crazy. I know I'm crazy. Here's how they can hang. So, all right, first of all, Raheem Mostert has a broken thumb. Probably doesn't play. Jeff Wilson had an illness. He had an injury. He seems fine now. Jeff Wilson is going to have to be the cog in the machine. Now, left tackle Teron Armstead is injured. Don't know if he's playing or not. They really could use him. But they're going to run Jeff Wilson. And if Mike McDaniel has to go to 2 tight end sets, if you got to go to 2 running back sets, he's got to heavy up the personnel. The Bills are not a good run defense. They are not going to sell out to stop the run. That is not their personality. That is not their personnel. So here's what I'm going to say. Jeff Wilson's going to run. But why don't they run Tyreek Hill? Jet sweeps. Jalen Waddle, ankle is apparently minor, should play. Run these guys on jet sweeps. Run these guys on bubble screens. Run these guys on pick plays. Run everything. Let them get the ball in their hands and let them run. And I think that's got to be the game plan. You've got to take the play clock all the way down. You got to shorten this game up. I don't know if Skylar Thompson has RPO in his repertoire is to be good with it or not, but they would want to use some RPO if they could. If he can, they will. Otherwise, it's going to have to be a diverse running game. And I think against his opponent, they can have success. Now, if they fall way behind, they're screwed. It's that easy. If the Bills get up 17-0, you ain't going to run the ball. You can't really do much because once you're in that rabbit hole, you're not coming back, right? And you can't just kind of sit there and watch the playoff clock run down. So, but the game plan has to be that. If you're playing DFS and you need an ultimate cheap dart throw, Jeff Wilson is not going to get all the carries. Salvon Ahmed is going to be involved. He played Buffalo earlier in the season. He had 6 carries, 43 yards, and a touchdown. Will he do that again? I don't know. But this game is going to be predicated around the run. They're not going to put it on Skylar Thompson's shoulders. So that's what I want you to understand there. So, and M, all right, let me see. Yep, I'll leave that. So I'll get you that parlay before we go. I definitely will do that. All right. Buffalo side of the ball. So Miami is going to have to approach this game, obviously, differently because they have their own third-string quarterback. So they have to go into this game saying, we got to slow it down when we have the ball. We have to hope to move it enough to drain the clock. But on defense, we have to get a couple punts, hopefully more. And Miami has an excellent pass rush. They're the 4th best pressure rate in the league. They have 5 players in their front 7 who are very good at bringing the pressure. 4 of them are elite. This year, they're elite pressure players. They have that in their arsenal. Josh Allen has Stephon Diggs. We know how awesome Stephon Diggs is. The other receivers have not played well this year. So the opportunity does exist that they can get pressure. The Bills are not a great running team. I'll get to the running game in a minute. Josh Allen is going to have to run here. He's going to run the ball in this game. In the playoffs, we see him turn that up because Miami gives up the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, but they give the 2nd most rushing yards to quarterback. So Josh Allen is going to take advantage of that, and he is going to run healthy. He had good running numbers in both games against this team when they met in the regular season. I want to say 77, like a 49, and Josh Allen is in a very, very good spot here. So we're very excited about his rushing capability. Now, he hasn't thrown for a lot of yards lately. So 254 or fewer in 6 of his last 7 games. Early in the season, he was like almost at 300 yards in 5 of his first 6 games. It's been a tale of 2 seasons since he had the elbow issue. Looking good. Bottom 11 in pass protection. We talked about the pressure rate that Miami has. That matches up well. Now, Miami can't cover. They're a bottom 7 coverage unit. So what they're going to have to do is they are going to have to bring the blitz. They're going to have to press man when they play man. And if they're playing zone, they're going to have to try to jump routes. They're going to have to be very, very aggressive. And I think they will be. I think they have the personnel where they can come out aggressive. It's going to be some big busts, but if they get a couple booms, and Allen's going to turn the ball over a bit. So they do have a chance to limit them. That's it. Josh Allen's going to tear it up on the ground in this game. The running game, these teams played twice. They played in that super heat game early in the season in Miami, and then they played in Buffalo later in the season. The running game got squelched the first time. Bill's running game did fine the second time, but this is not a good run matchup. And Devin Singletary is now really splitting more and more where Cook as we're going. Singletary's had 14 or fewer rushing attempts in his last 6 games. Not that he had a lot more earlier in the season. He'd have a couple games where he was getting more, but he's really now, capped at that rushing limit. Whereas James Cook has been up and down. He has what do you say? He has like a 3 and a 5 carry game, a 4 and 5 carry game, and then he's got 3 games out of time where it's 9 to 14. So he's getting there, but it's not every week. We never know what his true usage is going to be. And as receivers, they want to use them here because Miami gives up the most receptions in the league to running backs. And there was a game earlier in the season where Singletary had like 8 catches, and that's a way to attack. And if they're blitzing, that is going to be the outlet. Allen doesn't like the dump up, but we've seen him do it against this team. So I do believe, and Miami blitzed heavier earlier in the season. So I think they have to go to that here. And I do think, betting props on Singletary's over for receptions, even James Cook, I think there is definite possibility there because that's going to be the way to unlock what they have to do. Now, no good run blocking in Buffalo. They're number 28, so that's not been good. But the screen game and Allen running, where's that going? Now, the receivers, we've already said. Gabe Davis, less than 40 yards in 4 of his last 6, hasn't been the big play guy. He's getting some targets, 6 to 10 targets, 10 times in 15 games, so he gets a good floor of targets. Isaiah McKenzie, 25 or fewer yards in his last 5. He's kind of phased out. He was doing some things sporadically earlier in the season. Dawson Knox has been playing well, touchdowns in 4 straight, 38 or more yards in 3 of his last 4. Now, he's facing a defense that gives up heavy production of tight ends, 52 yards to Hunter Henry. Knox himself had 98 and a touchdown the last time they met. Jordan Akins had 61 and a touchdown. Cole Kmet had 41 and 2 touchdowns. Dawson Knox in the prop bet for yardage, he should go over. He's also a reasonable bet if you're one that bets touchdowns. That's very risky, but this would be a very favorable matchup for him to score a touchdown in this game, I would say for sure. Now, Stephon Diggs allows to be the focal point of the defense, and he's still going to get his damage done. He hasn't had the ceiling games. The 100 yards he had last week, first time since week 10. And he had 100 yards 6 times in his first 9 games. So he was rolling. He hasn't really been doing that well since Josh Allen seen the downtick in yardage. And, he's only had more than 10 targets once since week 12, where he was seeing that 7 times in the first 12 games. So it's really not been the elite usage that we've seen from Stephon Diggs. So you trust him as a good fantasy play here, but based on what we've seen, I don't know this is a ceiling game. Stephon Diggs, he could do that anytime. He could put up 150 and 3 touchdowns and you had a blink of an eye. But the trends show that's not what he is right now. He's more like an 80-yard guy, a 90-yard guy, might get a touchdown. That's what he's been lately. Now, if that Miami blitz falls apart, he's going to have a lot of single coverage. And if that happens, so there's a path. So I'm calling him high floor, and he likely hits that floor. But obviously, there are always scenarios where Stephon Diggs goes off. So overall, I said earlier, Miami's going to blitz. They're not going to have much of a chance to win. They have to sell out. I think Josh Allen could run for 75 yards this game. I think the screens that are running backs. I think Dawson Knox is involved. I think those are the catalysts in the offense here. I think that's what's going to play against what Miami has to do here. Now, where this line ends up and where you're betting. If you get this line, if this line blows up to 17, I would consider taking Miami with 17. Because, again, I think they can run the ball. I think they could shorten the game. I think they can. And defensively, I think they could do enough if they get some of that pressure home. Now, I wouldn't put a big amount on it because, obviously, if Buffalo catches fire early, that's the problem. If they get out to a 10-0 lead, 14-0 lead, now it's a problem because Miami no longer can utilize that game plan. But I do think there's a world where taking the points here, I could see that. Nobody's going to bet Skylar Thompson. Nobody. Miami fans will. But other than that, seriously, the game plan they can have on both sides of the ball, there is definite room where those can work out. Last game for the AFC, Ravens and the Bengals, Sunday Night Football. So Lamar Jackson hasn't practiced through Thursday. Looks as if we're not going to see him. Tyler Huntley got limited practice, and we probably will see him. He has some tendonitis in his throwing elbow. That's not good. But I'm sure we'll see him out there. This line has gone up. We're looking at 8.5 right now. 8.5 line is interesting. And when we look at this 8.5 line, and, John Harbaugh is going to have him ready to play. We understand how this works, right? And they have done very well against Cincinnati. They hold that offense down. When they played in week 5, the Ravens won 19-17. Now T. Higgins was dressed and didn't play. Baltimore didn't have Roquan Smith yet, but nonetheless, the Ravens defense can do this. Joe Burrow has not gone off on them like last year. The first time when they didn't know what Jamar Chase was about, that was different. He went crazy in that game. But since then, since they knew what they're getting, the Ravens aren't going to give up a ton. Let's start with the Ravens. Ravens obviously be very hard to handicap because Tyler Huntley has not been good this year. He was a surprise last year. There was no film on him. He had a few good games. And then the last couple of games, we totally saw the comeuppance because there was film. And this year, there was film from last year. So he's not getting it done. And the receivers are not much of an option here. You hope. Well, last year, he pounded Mark Andrews' targets. They weren't having that same kind of success together. They were getting something done. Andrews has 45 or more yards in 5 of his last 7 games. He had the big game with Anthony Brown. So, and for whatever that's worth. I'm sure Cincinnati wouldn't even take Anthony Brown seriously. So Andrews has not been an upside play, and I don't know that he's going to be, especially after he did damage last week. So I imagine Cincinnati's going to make it a point to bracket him. And in the running game, this has got to be about J.K. Dobbins. If they want to compete here, Dobbins only gets 12 to 17 carries a game in the last 4 weeks. His yardage has been good on those light carries. He has 93 to 125 in 3 of those 4 games. But he doesn't catch the ball. 1 catch for 3 yards over his last 4 games total. That's it. And this is a really good run defense they're facing. They give it the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs. They are literally a top 5 run defense. With DJ Reader is healthy, that's a great thing for them. And so, but they've got to unleash Dobbins here. They've got to say, you know what? Season's on the line. J.K. Dobbins, we're giving you 25 carries. Because if he gets at it, remember, this Baltimore is the second best run blocking in the league. Their pass pro isn't as good, but their run blocking is really, really good. And they can commit to that. We know they'll put fullbacks in. We know they'll put 2 or 3 tight ends in. They will do whatever they have to do from a personnel standpoint to make the run game work. And as good as Cincinnati's run defense is, Baltimore knows how to leverage personnel to make it work. To lessen the impact of DJ Reader on defense. So that's their key. Their key is to get Dobbins heavily involved. Now, Gus Edwards is recovering from a concussion. He was in a no-contact jersey as of Thursday. Don't know his status. The fact it's a Sunday night game buys him a little more time. But really, it's got to be about J.K. Dobbins. They need the explosive element and the sustaining element here. They really need to go to him. I don't know that they will. Receivers, we're not touching them. They have to get it done on the ground. I'm not going to trust Tyler Huntley against a very well-coached zone defense against the pass in Cincinnati. So it's going to be Dobbins. And if you're playing DFS, people are going to be out on Dobbins because they understand how good the defense is from the Bengals run. But I think Dobbins is a player you can look at this week because, again, Harbaugh has to realize he's our shot right now. He's our chance at creating offense. Can't prove it. Can't know for sure he'll do it, but that's what he needs to do, and he's a very smart coach. So I would factor that in when playing DFS. And prop betting. His prop is 61.5 yards. Definitely like to look at the prop bet for that. Before we get to the Cincinnati, I forgot to say, if you are on YouTube or you can punch the like and subscribe button, would really appreciate that greatly. I want to look up a document while I'm doing this too. I did a playoff ranking sheet for those that are doing fantasy playoffs. Now it's behind the paywall at RotoWire, but if you want 2 free days behind the paywall, you can see what I've got to go. You go to rotowire.com/. You don't need a credit card. So that's perfect. So you'll be in good shape with that. So you can go ahead and check me out there, and you can see my rankings for the playoffs, and I'd be happy to help you out with that. All right, let's get back to our last thing. We're on the Bengals, and I'm going through I have a different time with the props on it. The one I had didn't have the props live on it. I want to see if I can put some of those in for you. All right, so Bengals side of the ball. Now, Burrow has been held to 240 yards or fewer in 3 of his last 4 games and a total of 7 times this year. And he's actually struggled against the Ravens. He's put up 217 and 215 yards. And look, it's a physical defense. They know what this offense wants to do. They have the defensive personnel to be able to do it. Get physical with receivers. They can get enough pressure. This is a good defense. Now, excuse me. The Ravens have a middling pass defense, a middling pressure rate, but they give the 6th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Again, it's because they know how to put quarterbacks in uncomfortable positions. The game planning is always pristine. Now, the pass blocking is problematic for Burrow, but we know he gets around that. He's figured that out. Number 30 pass blocking. And Alex Kappa, the left guard, is going to miss this game. He got injured in last week. We know they recently lost Lyle Collins. Wasn't great this year, but he's a little better at run blocking. So there is a path where the Ravens can keep Burrow uncomfortable. The prop on Burrow is 268 yards. He hasn't come within 50 yards of that in either of the last 2 games. It's not happening. He's not doing that here. They have the lid on Chase. They're not letting Chase burn them deep. They don't since that first game when they did. They don't. It won't happen. I would run to the window with that bet probably as soon as the show is over. That's the one I would go with. Now, Joe Mixon, his carries, only 11 to 16 in the last 4 games. It looks like last year. Last year, this became a pass-heavy team down the stretch. Mixon was used less. Now he's being used heavily as a receiver. 5 to 7 receptions in his last 3 games. His receiving prop, 3.5. You got to play the over on that. That's the offense right now. That's what they're doing. That's his featured role. He has at least 3 receptions in all but week 14 this year, and his prop is 3.5. You got to bet the over on that. Don't see how he hasn't cashed that one, right? The rushing yard has been all over the board. 27, 65, 21, 96. So he's all over the board with the rushing. But that's the prop. That's the one we're going with there. He should be heavily used as he's been. Samaje Perine, only 4 to 7 carries and less than 25 rushing yards in his last 4 games. He had a while where he looked like he was going to kind of prop up and be like a 1B. He's a clear number 2 right now based on recent usage. Less than 20 receiving yards in his last 4 games. So it looks like right now, and they even set his prop at 16.5 rush yards. So Vegas is just seeing that limited usage we've seen in the last 4 weeks. Now, Jamar Chase. We all love Jamar Chase, of course. But 2 games against the Ravens, he gets his targets, 7 catches, 12 targets, only 50 yards. And then the last time they played, 13 targets, catches 8 for 86 and a touchdown. And his prop number is tough, though. 76.5, so I'm not bothered. But what I like is the receptions, 6.5 receptions. He's got 25 targets in his last 2 games. He's getting the ball. And that 6.5, again, that's easy money, in my opinion, because 7 and 8, he's gone over that in both games. He's the focal point of their offense. Even if the Ravens try to brag him, they're gonna throw him the ball in different ways. They're gonna get the ball in his hands. It's what they want to do as a coaching staff. So, Eddie, all right. Yep. Yeah, I like Windy City. Definitely. Love it. All right, so let's go to T. Higgins now. So T. Higgins, he had an illness, should be fine. The injury's been on and off, and he's been held to 35 or fewer yards in 3 of his last 4 full games. Now, in his last 11, he's at 93 6 times. So he's fairly boom bust. He's a great player. He's legitimately a number 1 receiver. He wins in so many ways. It's just that the offense puts the premium on getting the ball to Jamar Chase, which fine, right? You got somebody that explosive level, you kind of do that, right? So fine enough. So, but with T. Higgins, so what we've seen is the only time he's had double-digit targets were in week 2 and week 11. So he doesn't get that target volume. Now he gets at least 7 targets a lot. It's 11 different games. So that's been fine. But his prop is 61.5 yards. It's a tough call because the Ravens are so good at limiting. His targets aren't high enough. The 4.5 receptions is tempting, but again, they just really force to Chase so much. I would probably tend to lay off of that one. It really seems to be Mixon's going to get his targets and Chase is going to get his, but the yardage just isn't going to be there. Tyler Boyd, he actually fares well against Baltimore because they do such a big job of trying to take out Chase and Higgins. It does open up the middle of the field for him. Now, his yardage prop, Tyler Boyd's is 33.5 yards. So it's at that borderline, but he has had 40 yards or more in 4 of his last 8 games. And with this matchup, that is where it's going to be for Burrow for some cheap yardage in the middle. So I do think Tyler Boyd has a great chance of popping over a 33.5 yard prop. Again, that's going to be there for them. And the slot coverage, because Marlon Humphrey certainly isn't traveling in the slot to deal with Tyler Boyd. So, because he occasionally does, but when he's not there, slot coverage is very, very poor. So Tyler Boyd will have a voided area to be able to take advantage of that. Hayden Hurst's a middling matchup for him. There's nothing specialized. His prop is at 31.5 yards. He's going to get targets. I just don't see him as a high upside game here. The Ravens have been good against tight ends, held Freiermuth to 36 and 33 yards, and Njoku to 28. He did have a 71 earlier in the year. Evan Ingram, 1 catch for 4 yards. Juwan Johnson, 2 catches. He hit 40 yards. I just don't think it's a big volume game. Hurst gets a couple catches here, probably gets you 25 yards. That's probably what we're going to sell. So to finalize this last game before we answer some questions and get out of here, I think that when the Ravens are offense, I think the Bengals realize they have to run. They're going to know this. So I think they do commit extra bodies to stop them. We know how they like to drop players in coverage. They don't need to here. And so they're going to probably put extra players, but the Ravens are going to counter. The Ravens may come out with one receiver sets. We may see this. We totally may see one receiver. We may see some 3 tight ends. We may see some full house backfields. We may see a lot, and they are going to have a big battle in the trenches for numbers here. I do think J.K. Dobbins gets yardage. Ultimately, they're going to have to kill some clock, and if they can't do that, that's going to be problematic. But the Bengals on offense, like we said earlier, the Ravens understand how to defend them. If the Bengals want to run, they're fine. Go ahead, run the ball. We're just not letting Chase beat us. And they're going to make them matriculate the ball on the field. And that's not what they want to do. So this is going to be a grind fest. I know the Ravens are down talent here, but they're well coached. They know playoff football. They play it all the time. They play it in the regular season. They play playoff football in the regular season. That's how they live. So 8.5 points, I'm taking those points. I am taking, and I'm waiting. Let's wait till kickoff, right? We wait till kickoff. Let's see if we get a little more. I don't think it's going down. I don't think it's going below 8. So if we're getting 8.5, I think we're taking that. So Eddie, appreciate that, man. Like I said here. Now, Jamie, telling us your parlay, the Bills, the 49ers, and Bengals. Love the 49ers. Love the 49ers. Yesterday's show, we talked about how realistically the Seahawks have never had a chance to prepare for them. They haven't seen him with Debo in the last game. The first game, they didn't see him. They had Trey Lance started, no George Kittle. And now they have all the weapons. And defensively, they really make Seattle struggle. So I love the 49ers in this one. And I know you like the Bengals here, but man, if I can get that 8.5, John Harbaugh get 8.5 points. Wow. I mean, last week they almost covered that, right? With Anthony Brown. That was crazy, but that's John Harbaugh, right? And for the third game, let me just flip through and make sure I get this right. Let's see what we got. I'm going to look through these, make sure I got all my choices here. The third one's going to be tough. I want to get this one. 49ers minus the points for sure. We like that. Oh, and the Chargers. I'm going to go with the Chargers. I do believe that Justin Herbert gets it done. The defense is going to make the Jacksonville Jaguars struggle a bit. That'll be my 3-team parlay. All right, looks like it's what we have. Enjoy it. Hope everybody's going to watch these games. Have a great time with that. I'll do a gambling show with John Ryan. That'll be Sunday at 11:30 Eastern. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Follow me at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter. I'm getting the threads done. I'm getting them done. They'll get out there before games, at least a few hours before kickoff on Saturday. I'll try them out in the morning on Saturday. All right, everybody. Have a great day, and we will talk soon.